private land between here and the pedestrian bridge. And this has been developed down here over the years with state-type housing. And my major concern in here is this whole area, including the other side of the road where you have that maple swamp and up to almost to the industrial area, is quite a prime source for water. Groundwater is coming out of there. The little stream goes down through, but groundwater doesn't always pick streams to enter the river. There's a number of places in the middle of the winter, if you see a river totally frozen, in the middle of it there's a big open spot. You probably have a groundwater influx coming through and right up through the bottom of the river. So if it comes in here and it flows down this bank, that's fairly clean water going into the Brantford water intake. The engineers will tell you that we can deal with that and that they can put houses right up to the edge of the river and put things like stormwater ponds in to manage the flow of the surface water. But once you start putting hard surface on stuff, you end up in it. I don't care if it's city streets and the oil from cars and the contaminants that people drop in the storm sewers, or the pesticides that we're no longer allowed to use on the lawns, or whatever. That stuff eventually gets into what right now is pretty clean groundwater. And if we build on it, it'll no longer be clean. And groundwater has a characteristic. It's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees centigrade. It's at temperature all the time. We call it a cold water source because in the summer it goes into streams and it cools them down, and the cold water fish like trout and smallmouth bass are more comfortable. In fact, in the winter it's warm water because it keeps it open. And part of the reason we've got larger populations of things like bald eagles coming back here in the winter is that the river stays open below the dams where those influxes are coming in. And over time the management in the rivers put more fish in it, so food's there. The eagles come for food primarily. They're used to people. So if we develop this whole area, even around that area up there, we're going to have an impact on this bit of clean water coming into the river. And we don't have too many places along here. But between Cambridge and Brantford, there's something like 3 cubic meters a second of groundwater coming into the river. If we shut the river off in Cambridge, Brantford would still get, in dry times, 3 or 4 from Whiteman's Creek, another 5 from Annette, a little bit from Dobby, and some of the other little tributaries coming in, Airport Creek and some others that you've heard but have probably never seen. 3 cubic meters a second coming in from groundwater, so that's about 18 cubic meters a second. If you want to relate that to a size, these big tankers that are whipping down the road with oil and food and oils and other stuff in them, that's about 18 cubic meters. So one of those a second, 60 of them a minute going by is what you're looking at flow. So that's my concern here, and I guess one of the things from a developing point of view, if I buy this and I want to develop it, I'd do everything I possibly can to get it done. But a little bit when a developer buys a piece of land and sits on it for 20 years, it's like you and I buying a lottery ticket and hoping to heck on Wednesday or Saturday we're going to become millionaires. And I think developers, to a certain extent, have to accept the fact that they don't win them all. Somewhere along the way, in this kind of area, we need to be cognizant of that. Marguerite's on the source water protection group for our area, and the Grand and what's the other two? No. The source protection is the Grand River. There's three conservation. Yes, there's 3 conservation areas that are all looking at this whole business of source water.
Conservation area, Long Conservation area, and Creek Creek.
That's right. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael Allen.
Conservation authorities.
Yeah, and all over the province, these things are looking at the whole thing about water. We also have the engineers that say, hey, we can build a nice big pipeline and haul it in out of Lake Erie. If they do that, there's a lot of people under no circumstances would want any of that water to go back in the river, because that'll really distort the habitat on the river. But my concern right here is that this is a good source of water for the city, and we have 2 choices. We can spend millions and millions of dollars building facilities that'll clean up anything, or we can accept the fact that we have natural, pretty clean water coming in and keep the cost of water treating down by protecting this. And I don't think the taxes will come close to paying the cost of water treating to compensate for what we would lose in this area.
Agreed.
So I think the other thing that's down here is Davisville. Yeah, most of you probably know if we followed down this path another 400 meters, we'd come to an old native settlement there that was excavated by Laurier and some other people.
Gary Warwick and that.
Yeah, and all up and down the watershed, when you're right beside the water, you have these areas that there's probably hardly anywhere in southern Ontario that didn't have an Indian settlement along the watersheds. The rivers up and down, they moved, they went from their favorite spots, they went to where the food was. When the food ran out, they'd go to the next spot. And that would have been the river. Normally, when this river, before I'll say white man showed up, this river was deeper and narrower and colder than it is now. And our habits and practices to make it wider. And everybody did the same thing around the world. The river was the best open sewer in existence, and if you wanted to get rid of something, you threw it in the river. Because you really didn't care about the people that were 100 kilometers downstream, because you probably didn't know them. Today you do.
Bob,
They'll
don't
call
forget
you.
about the perch fan, the two that we have, and the two fields and the Ansi and all of those very significant environmental ecological areas.
There are, as Marguerite says, there's a few habitats that have been disappearing because we've been trying to change the perch fan. We're going to go up a little closer to that area. And where Procter & Gamble built on that side of the road, there's a big stormwater retention pond in there, and that's probably holding water that's feeding the fen right now. Brad and I were talking about that coming over. It can take, what, 15, 20 years before the disturbance that you do up here will show down there. And then gradually you'll start to see plants going off. They don't get a and that's a flow of groundwater going in the river. The one that we have to go down there and look at it, there's another one which wasn't very well known, and if you went on the stretch between 403 and Powerline Road on the Grand Valley Trail, the foot trail, there's an area in there, there's another fan.
Yeah.
Almost as big as the one that we're pretty much familiar with. And there's a whole bunch of smaller ones along the way up on any of those banks where you've got gravel in behind them. So when you start looking at that, you know, we do it, put the development in, and it seems like nothing happens. But it takes a while for anything too. It doesn't matter what it is, whether you're raising kids or raising property or crops, or whether you're developing. What you do today doesn't look the same as it might 20 years from now.